Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenido o bienvenida a este video. So, you want to have a perfect pronunciation in Spanish. Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Nate. I've been learning Spanish for 10 years now, and a lot of people nowadays confuse me to be a native Mexican Spanish speaker. And the number one reason that is because of my accent. Of course, I use certain words and phrases that are coming specifically from Mexico, but the number one reason is because of my accent and the pronunciation that I have. So today we're going to learn how to master and have that perfect pronunciation in Spanish. Now, if you're going to remember only one thing from this video, let it be this. You need to master the vowel sounds. Now, the vowels in Spanish are exactly the same as they are in English. So, a, I, O, and U. Okay, let's say that with me, okay? A, I, O, U. Okay, I promise you, if you study these and you pronounce them correctly, you have just 10x your Spanish accent. Whether you believe me or not, this is the number one dead giveaway that someone is not a native Spanish speaker is because they don't properly pronounce the vowel sounds. It really is that simple. I promise you. This is super basic foundational stuff, but a lot of people skip over it thinking that they already have good accents. And the reality is you probably need to work on these. Now, don't get me wrong. Over time, your accent will naturally improve through osmosis. So I've lived in Mexico for the past 2 years now, and my accent has greatly improved since then because I'm constantly hearing the language and my brain is constantly absorbing and then processing that information. I'm also speaking more often, which massively helps you improve your pronunciation. But this is the most important basic fundamental to learn and get right. A, I, O, U. I promise you, you get it down, you just 10x your accent in Spanish. So here we have some perfect cognates. Let's take a look. Let's practice, okay? Actor. Actor. Okay? It's not it's a. It's a little bit softer. Actor. It's not or, it's o. Kind of like a chimpanzee noise. O. Okay? Actor. Okay, you kind of have that circular shape, just like the shape of an O. Okay? Actor. Okay? Next, let's practice our E. Experimental. Experimental. Okay, so it's not experimental, it's experimental. Experimental. Okay, oftentimes students will make the E into kind of like an but it's okay? Okay? Individual. Individual. Okay? I. It's not no, it's I. Individual. Okay, just like the I in Spanish, it's the same pronunciation. Individual. Okay, imagine if these were all E's. Okay? Individual. Okay? Doctor. Doctor. Remember, it's not the, it's o. Doctor. And finally, usual. Usual. It's not usul, it's usual. I'm telling you, if you seriously just practice, you're going to have massively improve your pronunciation in Spanish. Literally, if you were to get one thing from this video, let it be this, okay? You've just perfected your pronunciation in Spanish. Okay? Now, if you really want to get good at Spanish, make sure to subscribe and also check out my website, SpanishWithNate.com. I have a free course on there. And I also have my full Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy, so make sure to check that out. Next, we have B versus V in Spanish. Now, this can be really tricky for us as English speakers. Now, B and V make the same sound in Spanish. Now, sometimes there is the exception in which a word will start with a V and it oftentimes makes a softer sound, kind of like a V in English, vestidores, okay? However, let me give you a little anecdote here. Last year, I was in the state of Chiapas, which is in Mexico. It's the most southern state. I highly recommend you go. It is absolutely beautiful, very lush, and wow, there are some incredible ruins there. But my girlfriend and I were at some waterfalls. And at these waterfalls, they had vestidores or changing rooms. However, this word correctly written is written with a V. However, we saw it written with a B, as in boy. Vestidores, okay? So even native Spanish speakers were incorrectly using B and V. Now, let that be a lesson to you that B and V make the same sound in Spanish. You could argue that V is a slightly softer sound. However, if you really want to do sound more native, make your V sound like a soft B. Don't make it sound like that hard very sound. Okay, that's why oftentimes Spanish speakers, when they speak English, instead of saying very, they will say very. Okay, that's because the B and V in Spanish make the same sound. Great, let's move on to this side of the whiteboard. Next, we have Z or zeta in Spanish, or theta if you're coming from Spain. So we have zapatos, zapatos. The Z in Spanish makes an S sound. S, okay, not Z, but S, okay, like silence or snake. Zapatos, zapatos, okay? It's not zapatos, it's zapatos. Next, doble R, which is oftentimes very tricky for us when learning Spanish. Rrr, okay? If you can't roll your R's, don't worry about it. I have a full video explaining this. But what you want to do is try and find what's called the alveolar ridge. It's a little bump at the top of your mouth. Feel that little bump right there with your tongue? All you're going to do is touch that with your tongue. Then you're going to blow out air and either move the tongue forward or backward, okay? So until you kind of find that sweet spot. It takes practice, but you can do it. If I taught myself to whistle in high school, you can teach yourself how to roll your R's. Okay, so we have two different words, perro versus pero, which sometimes the singular R for us in Spanish can almost be a little bit harder, okay? This is just a quick hit the tongue, boom, comes back. Pero, pero, it's quick. Whereas this is perro. Perro versus pero, okay? This means dog, this means butt, okay? Next, let's take a look at how sometimes a singular R in Spanish is rolled, okay? So whenever a word in Spanish starts with a singular R, we will roll it. That is very important. So this will not be rosa, this will be rosa, rosa, okay? You don't need to make it super exaggerated. It doesn't have to be rosa, but it's just a quick rolling of the R there, even though it's a singular. So rosa, okay? Rosa, okay? We'll also roll an R after L, N, or S. For example, in the very tricky word, alrededor. So it's not alrededor, it's alrededor. It's a tricky one. And this oftentimes can kind of trip us up when we're trying to have conversations with people, okay? Alrededor. And finally, this is a bonus one. It's not always that we will roll a singular R when it comes to the end of a word. However, oftentimes native Spanish speakers, especially coming from Mexico, will roll the R. It's typically kind of subtle, but instead of saying hablar, we'll have hablar, hablar. It is super, super subtle, but it is a little note to make. Next, we have doble L. So for example, pollo, okay? This basically makes a Y sound, okay? Pollo. Now, you may have heard Spanish speakers coming from certain countries like Argentina saying pollo, okay, kind of turning into a sh sound. You can do whichever you prefer. The majority of Spanish speakers will use that Y sound, pollo, okay, pollo. However, if you're trying to learn a more specific accent, then feel free to say pollo, okay? However, be careful. When learning a specific accent in Spanish, try not to be combining words from different countries with your chosen accent. So for example, I have a more Mexican accent, but I'm not using, for example, Colombian words like que pereza or things like that, okay? So if you're trying to learn a more Argentinian Spanish, then focus on the words and phrases coming from there along with the accent instead of, learning the Argentine accent, but then using, Mexican words like ¿Qué onda, güey? Speaking like that, okay? All right, next we have ñ, which basically makes an N and a Y sound. So imagine an N and a Y put together, that's the ñ, okay? Español, español. So it's not nol, it's ñol, okay? That NY sound, español, okay? Next, we have O versus O, okay? Very important. One has an accent and the other does not. Okay, the reason I want to mention this is because in writing, when you see a word that is, for example, hablo or habló, so one does not have an accent and the other does have an accent, make sure that you're properly pronouncing that O. You're really emphasizing the O. So hablo, meaning I speak, or habló, meaning he spoke or she spoke. Yo hablo, él habló. It's very subtle, but it is very important to get that down. Now, sometimes in Spanish, when you see an accent over a word, it doesn't necessarily change the pronunciation of that word. However, most times it does. So an exception would be with the two words sí and sí. Sí with an accent on it means yes. Sí without an accent on it means if. Now, there is no difference in the pronunciation. However, we use it in writing to understand which is which. When you're speaking with people, you'll understand the difference between sí and sí based off of context clues. Context is king in Spanish. Okay, now to end our lesson, can you pronounce this word? This is a popular tongue twister that we use here in Mexico, and it is pronounced as such. Parangaricutirimícuaro. Parangaricutirimícuaro. Say that 3 times fast. Parangaricutirimícuaro. Okay? So this is a good word to practice, have a little bit of fun with, and focus on the vowel sounds. Bueno, muchas gracias por ver este video. Please give this video a thumbs up. It really does help me out a lot. Like I said, make sure to subscribe and also check out my website, SpanishNate.com, where you can learn all the awesome Spanish tips. I also have my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy on there. If the price is too much for you, please send me an email at support@SpanishNate.com. Hopefully we can help you out. Bueno, muchas gracias. Espero que tengas muy buen día y nos vemos muy pronto. Hasta luego.